I'm Amita, and I have been studying housing issues, particularly in the city of Mumbai, but also in different cities of India for some time now. Uh, yeah, and my interest is in issues where the social interfaces with the technical and produces differing kinds of outcomes. There have been attempts to redevelop parts of Dharavi since 1986, when the Prime Minister's grant project was introduced, and as a part of the slum upgradation program linked to that, there was a program where buildings were made in Dharavi for the first time. Okay. Since then, and the talks of large scale Dharavi redevelopment project have been there again since about 1999. Then the state housing policy in the country, the Maharashtra state housing policy, talked about the Dharavi redevelopment project. So from 2005, this talk has formally begun. Okay, lots of resistance in 2006-7. Okay, and today we are literally seeing like the third version, perhaps, of redeveloping Dharavi. Okay. So it's a area that one is constantly in the process of redeveloping, and imaginations of redevelopment have only scaled up from redeveloping a small locality to redeveloping at a building level, at a small locality level, to now then building and redeveloping a sector and dividing the entire Dharavi itself into 80 or so developmental sectors, to now thinking about redeveloping entire Dharavi. So I think one should look at it in terms of how imaginations have escalated. As a sociologist, perhaps I should also tell you ki, what does a successful redevelopment mean? Does this mean that the entire existing built up area or the built footprint of Dharavi will be removed and replaced by another kind of a built environment? Maybe there may be some success there. But on the other hand, if you look at the outcomes that it may have for all those people who are currently residing there, who are working there, the institutions which are also making their life there, I think it is a very difficult question to answer. And there are lots of uncertainties there. The entire slum redevelopment process in Mumbai itself has been a case of crony capitalism, which is where the circle of capitalists has actually become smaller and smaller as the entire economics of slum redevelopment has become bigger and bigger. Okay. So I see a lot of parallels, in fact, in the previous process in 2005-6, when the first international tenders for Dharavi redevelopment were called. Initially, there were about, I think, 16, 17, I may be mistaken about the numbers here, but 16, 17 bidders, which came down to 7 bidders. And then there was such a lot of lobbying, both for the selection of the bidder, but at the same time, it was accompanied by a very strong campaign to demonstrate how complex the entire Dharavi redevelopment project is. As a result, finally, it was at least reported in the media that there were only 2 bidders who were remaining, and none of those bidders actually submitted a final bid at all. Okay? And therefore, then it was decided that MHADA would itself take a lead and develop one of the sectors as a pilot. And I think the Dharavi redevelopment project has been languishing ever since. If you look at the present project, I definitely see 2 aspects which are different. And one is that there seems to be a considerable political will that there has to be a financial and viability for that entire project. Okay? And obviously, there might be perhaps other considerations which may have also played out, but that I would say ability to enforce and see that a long term project which takes care of the several complexities which have been raised throughout the progression of Dharavi redevelopment. These may be issues of uh, firstly the aspirations of people who are uh, claiming to be eligible and uh, are eligible. Second, the complexities which may arise out of the fact that there are many people who are non-eligibles but who may still have some claims over housing. Third, the entire issue of livelihoods and extremely strong associations linked to some of those livelihoods. And the need to navigate across all of these stakes, and therefore the financial stakes becoming stronger. Perhaps all of those might have influenced these decisions. The first is the issue of illegality. I think fortunately, I think the government of Maharashtra has moved away from the language of illegality and it talks of eligibility and ineligibility. So all those people who are staying on the ground floor can show proof of residence prior to 2011 are considered eligible for rehabilitation. Okay. And I think the mezzanine floors, the entire people who may be staying on the rent, etc., are not eligible for rehabilitation. So I think this ineligibility for rehabilitation also, let me correct the numbers, it is not 50-50. In fact, the number of ineligibles may be far more, at least around 60 to 65% according to estimates. That's one. The second part of it is there are even more people who are working in Dharavi and who may whose presence is not there in any of the formal contracts also, even with people who are eligible occupants. For example, in the small, medium industries, there are lots of migrant workers who come to Dharavi on a much more seasonal basis. So they are currently completely invisible. So all of them except those who are eligible. So the eligible may get rewarded with a much better rehabilitation area than is being done in any of the other slum rehabilitation projects in the city currently. But on the other hand, there are going to be far more people who are going to be what the government says is it will not displace them. It will offer them rental housing at a particular decided rate. What that rate will be, we don't know yet. Okay, but if prices in Dharavi climb up and a rental price is also decided in relation to that, the implication is clearly going to be some kind of gentrification, etc., and there will be a indirect displacement. The third part is really linked to livelihoods. See, I think developers in the city or even planners in the city, architects in the city have learned how to rehabilitate or redevelop the residential part of a informal settlement. How to redevelop the working part of an informal settlement is a very big question. Should we recreate informal livelihoods? Is it possible to recreate a pottery industry in the premises of a residential building? Can that be scaled up and you create like a high scale ceramic kind of an industry from a pottery industry with the kind of capital, etc., that it requires? Are you going to be able to recreate a 13th compound which is full of recycling industries and which forms a very big chunk and has connections the country over in terms of selling its recycled, semi-recycled products? I think those are really the questions, because what happens to all of these livelihoods? And if those livelihoods are taken out of Dharavi, okay, what are Dharavi residents going to do? You will have bigger houses, but on the other hand, you would have lost your livelihoods. I think having an aspiration that every resident of Dharavi should be a millionaire perhaps is a laudable one. Okay, but who do we call a resident? The people who are eligible. Often I have seen that government officials equate the value of a built asset almost as the income of a person or income of a household. So, for example, we have several resettlement colonies built on the same principle of slum redevelopment. And even if the value of that tenement is around 10 lakh or so, it is. Okay? So, you are almost 1/10 of a billionaire, right? And I'm sure with Dharavi, with the quality of buildings which may be built perhaps by the Dharavi redevelopment project, people may become like millionaires just by owning that asset, right? But are they going to be able to hold on to that asset? That is up, and that is completely uncertain. Because if you're, I also see, having closely studied at least a few of the settlements in Dharavi, I do see that people constantly show a pattern of incremental development, but yet there are several vulnerabilities which are also there within all of these lives. Okay, and I think that is something that really goes completely unrecognized by the current policies. No? If people are not going to be able to hold on to these assets, people are going to move out of Dharavi. Perhaps even after the first declaration of the Dharavi redevelopment project in 2005 itself, there may have been several original Dharavikars who must have moved out of Dharavi. And there are new absentee owners in their place as well. Owners, I'm saying, not occupants. Okay? And if those dynamics have already changed, one may see a new Dharavi. One may see several millionaires in Dharavi. I am not very sure who will stay in that Dharavi. Very honestly, if I see the trajectory of slum redevelopment itself, beginning in 1991, I actually see that the first articulation of it as a rehabilitation project, as a project which is comprehensively meant to address the ills and the pains that people and residents of slums face, and therefore to address these needs, improve their health. Okay? All of these objectives have completely been diluted as the entire slum redevelopment schemes have escalated in the city. So today they have become re-housing projects, that too for a smaller section of people, because the numbers of ineligibles are far too higher, or there are other vulnerabilities because of which other people leave. So I think the point that one needs to ask again is, what is the objective of a housing project? Okay? Is the objective of a housing project to ensure really more sustainable housing, to give existing residents a better quality of life? Or is the objective or a strategic objective of a housing project basically to see that land in the city is used in a optimal manner from the economic point of view, right? And from that point of view, then Dharavi becomes this huge land value because of its proximity to Bandra Kurla complex. And perhaps people of small means then don't belong here at all. They should be better relegated to peripheries where they can afford things. Okay? So I think one needs to look through some of these kind of dimensions, because if land optimization is really the objective, then you need not look at the issues of whether there is a real sustainable housing, there is a better quality of life for existing residents. If there is a commitment to this objective of improving the life, then you would listen to people. Then there would be a facilitation which would be a equal balance of both listening to the developer agencies as well as listening into the people agencies. So that balance gets lost, I think, when you have a different objective in mind.